setting priorities and avoiding pitfalls and problems in vegetation monitoring. Setting priorities is a key step when we are planning our monitoring protocol. Let's assume that we have a ranch, and the overall goal for this ranch is the sustainable management of the vegetation, soil, and water resources for livestock production and wildlife habitat. Now, there are some management issues that need to be considered. There have recently been invasions by feral hogs and Russian knapweed, and in some spots there is localized erosion that is causing problems. There's also some conservation issues that need to be considered. There's an endangered owl and some sensitive riparian species that need to be addressed. As we set priorities, we consider conflicting issues in the context of management goals, conservation goals, the laws and regulations that may have priority over the actions that we can take, and also the information gaps that may exist in our knowledge base as we move forward. As we're developing the monitoring plan, we prioritize our efforts relative to the goals and issues raised above, as well as the available resources that we have on hand to support the monitoring effort. We also have to prioritize our efforts in the context of the scale that we are interested in monitoring at and the intensity that we're able to support. Ultimately, we want to optimize our monitoring efforts so that we can provide benefit in the information gathered and that we can inform management so that we can achieve our overall management goals. Now, there are common pitfalls that we can encounter in the monitoring process, and let's take a look at a few of these. Sometimes, after all of the planning that goes into developing a monitoring protocol, it's simply not carried out. So if the monitoring is not implemented, it's not going to be able to inform management. Sometimes the monitoring can suffer from poor planning and design, so that the information that we actually are able to obtain does not really address the management needs. After collecting data, if those data are not analyzed, they're not going to be informative. And sometimes, even after we've analyzed the data, we find that the results that we have are inconclusive. Another problem that we sometimes run into is if the results are simply not reported. They can sit in a file drawer or on a computer, in the files in a computer, but if they're not reported, then they do not achieve their goal of informing management. And then finally, sometimes stakeholders or managers may find that they do not want to accept the results of the monitoring process. There are certain pitfalls that we find that are related to poor implementation, and these are primarily related to poor planning, poor design. Sometimes we may have inconsistent observation between different observers. Record keeping is a source of error or can weaken the value of our monitoring data. And of course, data entry errors cause all kinds of problems with with data analysis, as well as being able to make inferences with confidence. So what can we do to avoid these problems? Well, let's look at this in 3 steps. In the development of the plan, one of the first things we can do is make sure that we plan very carefully and thoughtfully, incorporating all of the information that's available and making sure that the plan that we develop is going to inform management. The plan needs to be thoroughly reviewed by multiple people so that we can find any bottlenecks or flaws in the plan and revise accordingly. Finally, the plan needs to be clearly documented. So it has to be written and archived so that people can access it for review in the future, as well as to ensure that the protocol as it was first designed is being carried out. In the implementation phase, there are some things that we can do to avoid problems that we often see. To avoid the problems of having inconsistent observations, we want to make sure that we carefully train all the observers and calibrate them to make sure that their observations are consistent. The step of conducting a pilot study should not be omitted because that is a very important way for us to be able to troubleshoot any problems in the protocol and to make adjustments so that the plan and the protocol is doable. It allows us to do a final reality check on the utility of the plan. Once it's been implemented, then there has to be good follow-through. We want to make sure that we analyze the data, interpret the results, and then finally report those results so that they can be used by managers to inform the management actions and, if necessary, to adapt our management in light of the monitoring results. Each of these steps, if followed, can help us ensure that our monitoring plan is properly developed and executed.